Have you ever been angry at God? Me too. Most of us have had times when we've been really angry with God, and it affects us. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So go ahead and subscribe. You can find me also on YouTube, and you can find me on Instagram at Live Brighter with Tara. You can even go to my website, which is livebrighter.info, and you'll find some affirmations, you'll find a meditation, and some different resources to enjoy. So angry with God, woohoo! That can affect us for a lot of reasons. It's easy in this life. I think this life is kind of rigged in one way that it's easy to get angry at God because this world kind of sucks in a lot of ways. And we just got to be honest with that. So we can be angry at God because something bad happens to us. We can be angry with God if we've had maybe a friend that's passed, we've had illnesses, we've had things that we don't understand. I've had friends that were raped, I've had friends that have lost children. I've seen a lot of pain, and it's hard. I mean, this life is hard and things we don't understand, and it makes sense that it's so easy to be angry with God, especially if we think that this shouldn't have happened to us. The second reason why we could be angry at God is because something bad happens to someone we love. And that's really tough. When we see someone dying and suffering and cancer and childhood death and all those things, it is very difficult to understand for our minds to see that kind of suffering and pain. Another thing, a reason that we could be angry with God is because of the unjustness of the world. We see death, disease, we see people getting killed and murdered, we see horrible things happening in the world, and it's easy to be like, hey, I'm going to blame God, and I'm just angry at that. And I get it. And the fourth reason we could be angry with God is because we expect Him, like if we do this, then He'll do this. And I see this, I think, a lot with like Christian mentality. It's like, well, if I just follow God's rules, then I'm going to have a blessed life. Or if I do this, I'm going to have a great marriage and my husband will always love me. And we just blame God if like A plus B doesn't equal C because we somehow think that's how it should be. And out of those 4 reasons why we can be angry with God, I can really relate. So I would say I definitely had the last one. Like I thought that if I followed all the rules, I got married to a Christian, I saved myself for Him, and I followed God, that we would have a blissful marriage and everything would be great. And that is not what happened, as you all know. And there was definitely some anger with God about that because I'm like, why would I go through that? And so that was an example of anger with God. Seeing people suffer, and then also my own suffering. I have to say the lowest time in my life when I was really angry with God was when I was in the psych ward, when I was in 2001, and I was trying to get away from the abuse that I was experiencing and took my daughter, and then my extended family, instead of believing me, they saw my husband as this amazing person and believed him and took my daughter away, and I flooded the bathroom and ended up in the psych ward. So I'm in the psych ward. I have like a young daughter that's less than 1, and she is and she's away from me, and I am just hurting. And then I get abused in the psych ward where I got my shoulder that was hurt, and that was the lowest of lows. And then getting out of that, I was pissed off at God. And I have to be honest, I just said, God, I know you say you work all things for good, and good luck with this one. And so it was horrible. So I can definitely relate to all of those reasons to be angry with God. And when we're angry with God, it's just like any other relationship where it inhibits our relationship. And how does it inhibit our relationship with God? Well, it keeps us from hearing Him and seeing Him. When we're angry, it almost like puts this boundary up, and like we can't hear Him, we can't see Him, we've pushed Him out of our lives, and when we're unable to see Him working with us and talking to us about what is going on in our lives because we're angry at Him. Another thing is, number 2, we don't feel close. You can't feel close to anyone if you're just generally angry at them. And that's just same with God. We're not going to feel close to Him. Number 3, it can be very destabilizing, and especially for people that have had closeness with God, then it can be very destabilizing when you're angry at God and you don't trust him, because that then is like, well, what foundation do I have? And there's also, I feel like in general, no matter all of us, there's kind of like this hole in our heart that really only God can fill. Like only God and his love for us can fill that. And so when we're angry at God, that hole just becomes more pronounced, that emptiness. And I feel like that is a good symptom of we're just angry at God and we just feel that hole a little bit more. The 4th thing is it can affect all aspects of our life and our worldview. Because basically, when we're angry at God, we're the victim. Like this is happening to us. And we're not in the frame of idea that this could be happening for us in any way, because we're angry at God. And it can affect all aspects of our life. And that's just with anyone. Like if we're angry at somebody significant in our life, that anger starts to permeate. And I'm not saying anger is wrong at all, but just living in anger can permeate other aspects of our life and just really affect it. And then number 5, unexpressed anger lurking within us is not good for our health. And that's just not even with just God, but with anyone. If we're angry all the time, that, physiologically, our heart rate increases. There's more tightness in our chest. Like we can feel it. And anger quickly turns to bitterness, and it just kind of keeps going. It doesn't just simmer. It just like builds and makes us a little harder, and kind of hardens our heart, I would say, in a lot of ways. So unexpressed anger can really be challenging. And when shit hits the fan and our lives are not going the way we expected and we're going through hard things and we're seeing pain and suffering, it really goes back to the oldest question about God. And that is God really good? And does he have good intentions for you and me? And that's a really important question that we all need to wrestle with. And that's the oldest question of the book, the Bible, anything else. Is like, is God good in spite of all this crap? And does he have good intentions for me? And that's a really good thing to consider. So I like there's this really good, it's actually I think one of the oldest books in the Bible, the book of Job. It's a good one to read. And it's really interesting. One thing I really like about the Bible is it doesn't sugarcoat anything. And so here you've got Job, this guy that just seems to have it all together, and he's succeeding. He's got lots of kids. He's got money. He's got his wife. He's got his flocks. He's doing fabulous. And it's kind of interesting because within this story, God and Satan are having this conversation, and God's like, oh my goodness, do you see how faithful Job is? He's so faithful. He loves me. And Satan's like, oh yeah, he loves you because you give him everything he wants. Of course he loves you. But if you take that away, he won't love you. And that's, Satan's always kind of the accuser, like saying that we're and he's doing that in our own minds, telling us all the crappy things about us. And so this conversation goes on. He's like, that's not true. Like Job really does love me. And so unfortunately, I never want to be a Job. I'm just going to say that right now. Unfortunately, this is what happens. So Job's kids all get killed. He goes broke. He gets sick. The only one that doesn't die is his wife. So Satan leaves his wife because all she does is say, like, she's kind of like pissy, like, why don't you curse God and die? She just isn't helpful. So he's like, yeah, it's great. We'll just leave her. So he's going through really, really hard times. And I can't even imagine the pain he's going through. And he's, of course, questioning it and like wondering what's going on. And it's really tough. The very interesting thing in this story is that Job doesn't accuse God of wrongdoing. He trusts in God's goodness in all of that. And his summary is the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He didn't have the expectation that life was going to be good and, that suffering, he shouldn't suffer. And going through all of that horrible pain, he trusted in God. And then it was very interesting because he ended up having more kids, more wealth, more of everything, got healthy, and went through that hard time. So it was very interesting. I really liked what he said. Is like, God gives, things happen, and God is still good, and that's like a huge thing to think about. Are you a chronic people pleaser? Do you overgive, overfunction, pretty kind, and you're just tired, or maybe even a little bit resentful? Or are you wondering, like, wow, is this all to life? Is this how it works? Because I kind of feel like I'm going through the motions. Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days to unravel our thinking, beliefs, and live a life intentionally as we connect closer with God, ourselves, and others so we can be more confident and live brighter in this world. So, if you're angry with God, and I had to laugh because just the other day, I noticed I was really angry with God, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But this is what I did, and this is just a really good practice. So if you're angry with God and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm kind of tired of being angry with God, and maybe I got to work this out. First thing you do is you put him in the empty chair and you tell him how you feel. And what that means is you just like have a chair and you just put God on the chair, figuratively, obviously. And you just tell him exactly how you feel, how disappointed you are, how angry you are, and all the reasons why you're upset. Because you know what? God cares about your thoughts and feelings. And it is not good to keep that within us and hold on to that. And so just put him in the empty chair. And then the second thing is hold on to God's promises. Just like I did in the psych ward. Like I was like, I don't know how you're going to ever work this out for good. I'll tell you. But I held him to it. I'm like, okay, I don't see how you're going to work it out for good, but you say you're going to, so good luck with it. But I was open to him working it out for good. I had no vision of that, but I was open. And so that's the third thing, is be open to look at the circumstances differently. That doesn't mean you have to all of a sudden think, hey, this is great. No, just feel your feelings, go through our suffering, but be open at some point to look at it differently, and then time will tell. I don't know what your journey is or what you're going through. I just know that God really loves you. I really like Psalm 116. If you ever want to feel the feelings, it's a good one because it's really important to know that God hears you. Like he hears us. And in Psalm 116, it says, I love you, Lord, for he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. And in it also says, the Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. Which that was, Psalms is in the Old Testament. And that is what God was known for in the Old Testament, is being gracious and compassionate and full of mercy. Which always cracks me up because I read the Old Testament and I'm like, wow, this is like a complete shit show. It's wild. You've got the man of God. It's just wild. And I'm thankful he doesn't sugarcoat just the humanness and the crap of our lives. But it is good to know that he is gracious and compassionate, and he sees you, he cares for you, he cares for me. And it's easy to forget that. One thing I do is kind of preventative is I know that life can really throw some curveballs that we can't control. Things happen. And so I try to create remembrances of all of the things that God has done for me. And in the Old Testament, whenever God would do something amazing, they'd do these rocks and have an altar, and as a way of remembering the things that God had done. And it's because we forget. I forget. And so I have I used to do something when I first got into real estate, is every time I had a closing, I would buy something that I really wanted. And I just remember buying a nice pair of these beautiful brown boots and buying a new coat. And then I used that whenever I would wear it to remind me of how God provided for me and have remembrances of that. I also have a ring that I call my God ring. And it's just a ring with a sapphire that my daughter has the same sapphire. It's actually in her wedding ring. We had matching sapphires, and I got it mounted, and I just got it for myself because I just wanted to be able to look at my finger and remind myself that God loves me and he is good even when I'm struggling. And so it's kind of nice when we can have those remembrances of objects or something else, or even write down, so that when we are going through hard times that we can remember how no matter what we go through, that he is willing to show up for us, even though we don't understand. So, so anyways, back to my anger at God. So a couple weeks ago, I was trying to read the Bible, and it was very strange because I'm like, wow, this just feels very blank and flat and lifeless to me. Like, I'm usually, when I like read the Bible, there's like a connection I feel, and there's usually words that will stand out, and I'm like, oh, I feel like that's how he's speaking to me today. And he speaks to us through all different things, and he uses his Bible, and I like it. So I was reading it, and it had been a couple days. I'm like, wow, this just feels like I'm reading a book. It like has no life. And I had to think about it. It was a very strange feeling, and I'm like, oh, I am feeling disconnected from God, and it's because I'm angry at him. And I had to just do what I told you. I had to put him in the empty chair and be like, hey, I'm not happy about this because you knew about this and I didn't, and I don't, da da da. So I had my conversation. And then I'm doing what I told you guys to, encouraged us all to do, which is just to express it and be open to look at it differently, and also to call God out and be like, okay, you say you're going to work out for good, and you say you're good. I'm going to trust you. And so I had to work through that, and it was very interesting, the difference as far as like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, that really did shift the Bible for me, reading it again, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, now I can see the difference. And so it's just interesting. And I think a lot of times, like, I'll want to get angry with God because I don't want to accept reality. And this has always been a chronic problem. I have ideas of the way things should be, I guess. And accepting how things are is super important, and not thinking, I always have to remind myself that I'm not the victim. Things don't happen to me. They happen for me, even if it's challenging. And that all the challenges I have can be used to strengthen me and to grow me. And that's a perspective that has helped me. So whether you like it or not, God loves you and he believes in you, and he empathizes with your pain and suffering, because he went, through Jesus, he went through all of it. He suffered, he, got hurt, he got rejected. He really feels our pain, and he cares for us. And he also designed you incredibly unique, special, with just in a way that is different than anyone else. And he sees you, he delights in you. I think it's really cool to think that God delights in us, and it's true. He thinks of us like these little kids, and he just thinks we're just all so cute and special, even when we go and fall in the mud or skin our knees or punch the other kid on accident. And he really does love us. And so if you're feeling disconnected from him, you may be angry, and you may need to talk to him about that and just express yourself, be real. And I wish you well with that. I just think it's going to help. It's going to help strengthen you and strengthen your relationship, which I think helps us live brighter every day, having that relationship and know that we are completely loved. So I believe in you too. Grow 1% a day and make it a great day.